Hello, my friends. Hello, everybody. I would like to talk to you today of a place I've actually never been, but I read an article in the newspaper yesterday and it drew my attention to the island of Greenland. So Greenland, as you might know, is an island between the Arctic and the Antarctic Oceans, and it is the largest island in the world. It belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark, but it enjoys some autonomy. Actually, Denmark granted home rule back in 1979. And despite it being closer to North America, its destiny and its history has always been more related to Europe. Or at least after the 10th century DC. Today, its largest population is the Inuit people, who are originally from Canada or Alaska. And 3/4 of its surface is covered by an ice sheet. But the Inuit people is not the first people who inhabited this island, so they only reached Greenland in the 13th century. And before, Greenland had been under Norwegian influence and later a Norwegian colony after 1261. But there is a mystery concerning how the Norsemen disappeared from Greenland. They arrived there in 985 DC, and the Vikings or Norse people remained there for 4 centuries. And then they suddenly left. So they left the southwest coast before, and then they also left the settlements in the east of the island. The last Viking ship that is reported to have sailed from Greenland was in 1410. And there many assumptions were made as to why the Norsemen abandoned Greenland from one day to the next. One theory is the Black Death, as Norway was suffering from an internal crisis, also a financial crisis. I would say it seems like they couldn't maintain the colonies anymore. And another theory that was very popular until a very short time ago is related to the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age started in the 14th century and lasted until the 19th century. And it was a time when temperatures became lower and lower, and so around this island, the wider portions of the sea started to freeze. So this also made navigation more complicated. But very recently, an essay came out in the review Science Advances, and research was carried out concerning a chemical and physical analysis of lake debris. And it seems that the reason why the Norsemen abandoned Greenland was not a drop in temperature, but a very long drought. And Greenland was also interesting because it was the very first example in history of territorial marketing. As you might know, by definition, territorial marketing is a widespread strategy for promoting territorial attractiveness, especially for areas with low resources and small businesses with rural and informal economies. And it is also performed currently in the European Union. Its aim is to attract people and investors in order to promote interventions and the development of the land that is promoted. And the very name Greenland is the result of a territorial marketing operation. This is told by the Icelandic historian and clergyman Ari Þorgilsson in his Íslendingabók, that is the book of the Icelandic people. This man explains that Erik the Red, a colonizer, chose this name in order to convince Norsemen to move there, so to leave Iceland for Greenland. So many people left Iceland, that is by name the land of ice and snow, to go to this Greenland that was supposed to be much nicer and with a lot of vegetation. But as it often happens with marketing, this proved to be a little bit of an overstatement. So 25 ships left Iceland in 985, but only 14 of them reached their destination. And the survivors found little vegetation and a lot of ice. But the people who remained, who survived, decided to remain and lived there. They were not scared. And so the population of Norsemen in Greenland reached 2,000 people. They were mainly farmers, so they lived on animal husbandry, but they were also hunters. They hunted walrus and they sold walrus teeth to Europe. They seemed to be very appreciated. Nevertheless, it was a hard life because the cattle had to stay in warm, dark stables all winter. And in spring, sometimes they were so weak that they couldn't move. And this hard life later became nearly impossible. So it seems that there was no real drop in temperatures, but there were drier and drier summers. This is proven by the fact that irrigation canals were found. So this is evidence that people were looking for more water than what was available. And also by the fact that skeletons of dead animals were found and they have worn teeth, which means that the animals were chewing stones and sand together with the grass, animals like goats and sheep. So it seems that the real reason why the Norsemen had to abandon this island was drought. There were less pastures, and so there was also less fodder for the cattle in winter. And this made animal husbandry unsustainable. And also men and women depended much more on seafood for their nutrition. Before, their nutrition was more based on land products and animal sourced products. But after this drought, they had to start fishing, which was a dangerous and precarious activity. And so it is also true that the portions of ice around the island increased, and so this made navigation and trade much more difficult. And so the Greenland had betrayed its promise and the Norsemen left. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this story.